now. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those you are in this session, in this new webinar organized by the Communication Department of the Faculty of Business and Communication at the University of Vic, Central University of Barcelona. Thank you very much also to the Spring Network, who is the co-hoster of this event. And thank you very much for our two speakers today, Carlos Pulleiro and Fernando Gutiérrez Chico, both researchers on sport and communication that are going to present us their new research about nationalism and football. So thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you very much, Fernando. The floor is yours. You have your time to present your research, and then we can have a good chat with all the panelists and the other systems. Thank you very much. The microphone is closed, Carlos.
Now?
Yeah, perfect.
I was silenced. Thank you very much for the introduction. I was saying to the week, to Spring, for this opportunity of sharing our latest research, which is called Naming and Lower Cases in Football Diplomacy, Spain v Kosovo during Qatar 2022 qualifiers. And even when Fernando and me are not native English speakers, we realize that the differences in terms of lower cases and capitalized words. So it's not a mistake, the difference between Spain being capitalized and Kosovo all in lower cases. Well, this will be the most reduced example of the whole presentation of today, because in the end it was the football diplomacy strategy of Spain countering Kosovo's political symbolism in sport during these qualifiers. So if anyone needs to leave earlier, that will be the basics of our presentation. But for those who have all the time to attend to this presentation, this webinar is based on our latest article published in the journal Communication and Sport 2 months ago. If you want to have the complete version, I think you can download it online, but if you have some issues, you can send an email to Fernando or to me. Later at the end of the presentation, we'll share our email so we can share it with you. And at the same time, this publication, and there are some slides that are going to have some elements of other two publications that we had, in my case, in International Journal of Sports Policy and Politics, where this is where we obtain part of the international relations theoretical framework about how is the relationship between states and sub-state governments in international sports. And Fernando published with Íñigo González Fuente in Politics in Central Europe, more specific content about the previous relationship between the Qatar 2022 World Cup between Spain and Kosovo. So if you are interested in this, in knowing more about what we are going to present right now, here you have some articles to read it. So to introduce the topic, the basic issue here is that Spain does not recognize politically Kosovo as an independent state, but Kosovo is recognized by FIFA and UEFA since 2016. So for Spain, and here we're including the state and the Spanish Football Federation, there has to be some kind of balance between showing this non-political recognition to Kosovo and at the same time respecting the political symbology of this country, because it is it has a full recognition in FIFA and UEFA, and there are rules and protocols that are required to be met by any country that are going to that are part of FIFA and UEFA in terms of receiving foreign national teams. And here we have, for example, the first image of this presentation, where we can see, and later Fernando will explain more in detail the changes about this situation, because this is when both Spain and Kosovo were in the same qualifier, in the same group for qualifying at the Qatar 2022 World Cup. And here we can see that we have the Kosovo's flag. The naming of Kosovo is on the same size than Georgia, Greece, and Sweden. But we will see how this is going to change. So in terms of the context from international politics, we need to ask how this can happen. And we need to begin with differentiating between the political and the sporting geography. Basic ideas: in United Nations, we have 193 states recognized. In the International Olympic Committee, we have more national Olympic committees recognized, more than 200, and FIFA has even more national federations. So there are a few differences. There are a few exceptions. But anyway, the basic idea is that the state is the basic political unit where sports federations and International Olympic Committee based is its recognition policy. So about the sporting geography, we need to go back to the beginning of the 20th century, to the imperial era, when Coubertin explained very well that there is an athletic geography that might differ at times from political geography. In this context of European empires, where if we will be attached only to a state competition, we will have Germany against Austria-Hungary and against the Russian Empire, and that will be that three will cover almost all of this Central Europe and Eastern Europe. So in terms of promoting sports and moving away from this imperialism, that's why this sporting geography concept began to exist, in order not to limit only competitions to this state in terms of empires. There were some exceptions at the time, but like the most basic ones in terms of FIFA, differentiating between Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and Northern Ireland nowadays, and I think I didn't miss anyone, and England, I think. But anyway, even with that, at the beginning of the 20th century, England need to push, and Scotland need to push that in order not having only a UK federation recognized on FIFA. So that's an example of how, even at the beginning of the sports internationalism, there existed these constraints and trying to adapt the sports geography to the political geography at the time. But anyway, even when today we have these concepts of sporting country, territories that are accepted and recognized in the statutes of international federations and on the International Olympic Committee. As I mentioned before, the basic idea is the concept of the states. So even when there are these exceptions as a sporting country that in most of the situations, they don't have the full membership status. In the end, the sports institutions wanted to have some room for maneuver from international politics and have somehow of an independence. Here we have this evolution, for example, and that's the ironic part, because during the Cold War era, in this context of decolonization, at the IOC, the expression country refer to any country, state, territory, or part of territory which in its absolute discretion is accepted by the IOC. So in the end, it all depends on the IOC criteria in order to which countries accept or not. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, having this pressure of these newly created states to have this sporting recognition as a portraying of its political independence from Russia or from Serbia, the IOC realized that the sporting recognition could be interpreted as on a political way, and that's when they decided to introduce the expression country as an independent state recognized by the international community. So we're introducing here in a very explicit way that first goes politics and then goes sports. So before the International Olympic Committee decides to recognize any country, first there is a requirement of some international agreement. And they weren't so explicit in terms of having directly United Nations, but most of the time it is United Nations recognition, the main guidance for the IOC in order to accept new national Olympic committees. I think that we all know that the role of the International Olympic Committee in terms of being this moral guide and ethic guide in terms of politics. The most recent example is with the war in Ukraine, that most of the international federations reacted to or wait for the decision of the IOC in order to exclude Russian or Belarusian athletes. And in this case was the same. In 2001 and 2004, UEFA and FIFA respectively adapted their statutes in line with the IOC, but in this case with the motivation of Gibraltar recognition, which we have here, as we will see later with the case of Kosovo, we have the opposition of Spain. So at least until 2015, UEFA declared that to be recognized as a national football association, it should be situated in the continent of Europe and based in a country which is recognized by the United Nations, here it is more explicit, as an independent state. FIFA goes more in the way of pure International Olympic Committee, saying that countries are independent states recognized by the international community. Of course, there are nuances. In the case of UEFA, they say that there could be exceptions about having national football associations recognized that are not placed in Europe, like Israel, or for example. And also, FIFA recognized that there are nuances in terms of there are exceptions to not being. In terms of not being an independent state that can be accepted by FIFA, but this is like the main rule. In fact, after the recognition of Kosovo in 2016, UEFA changed a little bit this article and introduced that based in a country which is recognized as an independent state by the majority of members of the United Nations. Which is precisely the current situation of Kosovo. It's not an official member of the United Nations, but it is recognized by more than 50% of the members of the United Nations. So in sport, we have two ways of being recognized by the IOC of international federations. If it is under consensus situation between the state and its sub-state government, as it was the case of Serbia and Montenegro, that there was a referendum, people voted in favor of a split between Serbia and Montenegro. So Montenegro is recognized very quickly in United Nations, so they need to create a National Olympic Committee and at least 5 national federations in order to be recognized by the IOC and in the case of football by FIFA and UEFA. And this was a very fast process. But what happened in the case of Kosovo? The situation is very complicated because we have a fight. On one hand, we have the Serbia, and on the other hand, we have the government of Kosovo. Serbia does not recognize the independence of Kosovo, so they're trying to convince its government on United Nations that no, Kosovo is not an independent state; it belongs to me, to Serbia. So there is this fight. There is this diplomatic fight in terms of gaining support from other countries to either support Serbia or either support the independence of Kosovo. And the same happens in terms of the international federations and International Olympic Committee. But in this case, the leaders at the national Olympic committees and the national federations. So the most usual situation is that first, there are some federations that recognize the Kosovar national federations. Then it should arrive the recognition of United Nations, at least more than 50% of its countries. And then there is the final decision of being recognized by the International Olympic Committee. And this was a key moment for the Kosovar sports recognition because, as I mentioned before, with the case of the invasion of Ukraine, most of federations waited until the IOC recognized Kosovo. We can see here that it was in 2014, only 13 federations recognized Kosovo, the Kosovar federations. And after the IOC was recognized Kosovo, from one year to another, it doubled the number of Kosovar federations. And in the case of FIFA and UEFA, it wasn't until 2016. So moving from this theoretical and general situation of Kosovo, what happened in the case of Spain? And we are landing to the Qatar 2022 World Cup. So Spain have some political difficulties in terms of national identities, in terms of independentist movements. In the most notorious ones are in Catalonia and in the Basque Country. And the Spanish government has been very clear in this situation with Kosovo. Last year, for example, the president of Spain made an official visit to Serbia, and here declared its continuous support to Serbia in terms that Kosovo is part of Serbia, and this will be the position of Spain, independent to the pressure of the European Union, because Spain is with Slovakia, Cyprus, Romania, and Greece, the only European Union countries that still does not recognize Kosovo. So moving from this political situation, there's no way I'm going to give any inch to interpret that we recognize Kosovo. Sports, it's also a matter a state issue. So in this way, the main attitude of Spain towards Kosovo has been boycott of Kosovar participation in any event that has happened in Spain. This boycott is mainly made by at administrative and at symbolic level. The most hard one is in terms of not accepting Kosovar visas or delaying it until the last minute. And at symbolic level, the most obvious situations is the ban of a Kosovar official flag and the anthems. And I'm going to introduce 2 examples. The Mediterranean Games in 2018 were hosted in Catalonia, in Tarragona. And on the left image, we can see the opening ceremony where the national delegations on this parade. We can see in the picture that it is the flag bearer, I think, it isn't wearing the official flag of Kosovo. It's wearing the flag of the Olympic Committee of Kosovo, because at the last minute, the Spanish government forced the organizers of the Mediterranean Games you cannot show the official flag of Kosovo. So as you can see in the pictures, for the Kosovo was like, okay, I don't care. You can watch that the flag bearer just have the Olympic Committee flag rolled, so it's almost it's difficult to see. And the athletes wearing their Kosovar flags, like, I don't care about the Spanish government. We are Kosovo, we are here, are going to compete as any other country. And in the website of the Mediterranean Games, we can watch here that Kosovo is the only participant that it doesn't have the official flag. So that is one of the examples before the qualifiers of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. And 2 weeks ago, well, at the end of March, this situation after the World Cup, as Fernando will explain right now, this situation still continues. Spain organized the senior championships of the Karate Federation, the European Karate Federation. And again, there was an issue with the flag. So Spain still continue preventing the Kosovar political symbolism in these sporting competitions. But in terms of football and international Olympic committees, this boycotting attitude is beginning to act against Spain, because in 2019, I think it was after another the World Championships of Karate in Spain, maybe Fernando can correct me later, when even it is a non-full member of United States country, but you have full membership in the IOC and UEFA and FIFA, you can demand respect at protocol level. And that's precisely what happened. Kosovo just went to the IOC and UEFA and FIFA and say, hey, I'm a full member, I deserve the same respect as other full member countries. And the IOC even threatened to stop awarding international tournaments to Spain unless Kosovo rights and symbols were guaranteed, as it happened in the UEFA under 2017 European Championship qualifiers. And UEFA indeed released a statement by which explaining that teams which cannot host Kosovo clubs or national teams on their territory, as it could happen in the case of Spain, may request to organize their home match on neutral ground. So even when you don't have a full political status at United Nations, you can count on this situation with your full membership in terms of, okay, I have the same rights as other full members in United Nations. And I think now is the time for Fernando.
All right, thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Xavi, thank you, Noel, thank you everyone for inviting us to share with you our research. This second part will present the results of our research, but firstly, we need to stress another important concept that we work with in our study, which is the issue of the names, right? So we are emphasizing very much how Spain played with the names in this affair with Kosovo during the qualifiers for the World Cup in Qatar. So I will briefly introduce a few issues or a few concepts, ideas that we worked with. And the first one is to underline that the concept of names or the policy of naming has been already studied within social sciences from an anthropological point of view, from an international relations perspective. And what the scholars are telling us is that names are not innocent. They imply some power relations. So in this sense, we really like the concept of political onomastics, so the politics of naming, in the sense that it becomes a triangulation between names, politics, and power relations. And this is clearly seen in the Olympic Charter that Carlos was referring before, and how the IOC sort of declares or states what should be the name or what should the name of a contender include, as you can see in the definition that we brought you here. And from this definition, there are two important aspects to highlight. So first, that the name of the contenders play a core role in all this construction. But secondly, and equally important, is that regardless of the name you choose as an NOC, it needs the approval, it needs the legitimization of others. So this is very clear in, for instance, in the studies about identities in anthropology. So name is important, but as important as this is, you need the approval, you need the acceptance of others. So in the next slide, we keep telling about this, and for instance, Bourdieu highlights the power of naming or explains the power of naming as having the capacity to shape the world according to one's interest. And in the case of sport, we here bring some examples, 3 clear examples from different times along history. One refers to something that happened in Spain for many, many decades under the dictatorship of Franco. The policy of the central government was to Hispanize everything, absolutely everything. So sport was not alien to this, and the government decided to erase any sort of foreign word or concept, name, etc., etc. That's why, for instance, Athletic Club Bilbao was forced to be renamed and became Atlético Bilbao. So from Athletic to Atlético. Actually, as an anecdote, the first thing that Athletic Bilbao as an institution did when Franco died was to recover the original name. So not even the colors, not even the Basque flag, no. The first thing they did was to go to whatever department and say, okay, we want to retake our original name. Same thing in terms of dispute happened between the Republic of China, People's Republic of China, and Taiwan when China decided to go back to the Olympic movement and how to deal with the incorporation of Taiwan and so on. So among the many issues they had to discuss was the name of Taiwan, and eventually the agreement that they got was that Taiwan should play or should perform under the name of Chinese Taipei. So as you can see, this was not a minimum issue for the relations between one national Olympic committee and the other. It was a very, very relevant aspect in order to set an agreement. However, there's this situation do not always work in cases of conflict or perpetuate in terms of conflict. There are exceptions, and for instance, we can find here how the dispute between Greece and the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia, when they found an agreement about the name, the official name of the latter, basically everything follows suit. So Greece and Macedonia agreed on the new terminology, on the new name of the latter. As I said, they decided to be called North Macedonia. And once the agreement was made between governments, everything continued, everything followed suit, as I said, and the National Olympic Committee of Macedonia became the name, the National Olympic Committee of Northern Macedonia. So it was a cause-effect connection, very quick, very fast. But names, we can see them as a triangulation between the namer, the named, and the name's connotation. So this leads us to see that naming can become or can act as a political weapon in cases of sports diplomatic conflict. And Spain actually was not new on this. So using or playing with names, using names as a strategy was not new for Spain. In fact, it already used it against Kosovo, as Carlos was anticipating before, during the 2018 Karate World Championship that was hosted in Madrid. Kosovo, or the Kosovo delegation, had to perform under the acronym WKF5, which stands for World Karate Federation 5, because the Spanish Federation and the High Sports Council didn't allow Kosovo to perform under the name of Kosovo. So they had to find an alternative, and this was the name that was actually showing up in the scoreboards. So in order to frame all this theoretical framework into our current case study, we can see that when Spain and Kosovo were drafted into the same qualifying group, as soon as the matches were around the corner and the Spanish Federation and the Spanish delegation had to deal with the preparations of the two matches, both the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the High Sports Council decided to or stress the idea or the strategy of offering a differential treatment to Kosovo. So, to whom did they send this message? Who should apply this differential treatment? Well, on the one hand, we have the Spanish Football Federation, and on the other hand, we have the Spanish Public Broadcaster, RTV. So the Spanish Football Federation, it was obvious because they were the ones playing, they were the one organizing everything. So basically, they were the main actors in this footballing issue. The Spanish Public Broadcaster, on the other hand, apart from belonging to the state, had the broadcasting rights. So obviously, they also had a say on this. And how was this differential treatment being decided or designed? Well, what the government decided was to apply via naming. In other words, there was a message, a clear message to try and avoid using the concept or the term of Kosovo and the Republic of Kosovo. And this was because UEFA and FIFA had previously threatened Spain to be out of the competition, not only in these qualifiers, but also in other sports through the IOC. If you don't respect Kosovo's symbols, if you don't treat Kosovo as another contender, you risk to be out of any international event. So eventually, that's what Spain or the Spanish government came out with. We need to show you a differential treatment via naming. We will not call you Kosovo, we will not call you Republic of Kosovo, and that's our way to show you or to tell you, we don't recognize you, you are not at my same level. So in order to conduct this research, obviously we have to set up a research question, and that's the one you can read on the screen. So how and to what extent did the official name of Kosovo become a key diplomatic element for Spain during the Qatar 2022 World Cup qualifiers? And for this, we follow this methodology. So basically, we conducted a content analysis of three major sources. There was a sort of source triangulation. So on the one hand, we had all the Spanish Football Federation official communiques and press notes on the website, plus on social media. We also analyzed the Spanish public broadcasters' coverage. And in order to gain perspective on all this, we decided to compare it with the coverage of three private media outlets. Actually, one newspaper, one radio station, and one TV. These three are, let's say, some of the most important private media in the Spanish media landscape. So in overall, we collected 219 articles, posts, pieces of analysis, let's say. And the key dates or the time lapse we used for this analysis was divided into two main points. So the first one was the World Cup qualifiers draft, which took place on the 7th of December 2020, and on the 8th was, let's say, the after draft with all the comments, discussions, evaluations, etc. And we also decided to take the home and away matches windows. So by window, we refer to all that time lapse where a series of consecutive matches take place for running these qualifiers. And the beginning of the windows for us was the official call-up of players by the national coach. So basically, when the national coach, in this case Luis Enrique, made public the list of players that he was calling to play these qualifying games, and it was ended with the day immediately after the last game of these windows. And this is because obviously in the post-match, let's say, you can still find lots of news analyzing the game, analyzing the potential consequences of these results, etc., etc. So let's start with the cream. Let's start with the results and see how this was performed. So in this first table, we can see the lexicon that was used by the Spanish Football Federation on its web page. And you can see that the term Kosovo was actually one of the most used ones. So it was not the most used one because Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, was the most referred term, but Kosovo went hand in hand in a sense. So it had 13 mentions in 12 articles. So basically every article had a mention, an explicit mention to the term Kosovo. Then of course there were lots of alternatives and a rich, let's say, terminology, which goes hand in hand with this policy that we saw a few slides ago. But we can see that the mandate of avoiding the term Kosovo didn't really happen. It happened, and actually it was placed in each and every article that was written about it. When it comes to media, we have to make a clear distinction between the draft and the windows, the qualifying windows. In this first slide, we can see how the draft was covered by the different media outlets, the public one and the private ones. So you can see that they all coincide, they all match in using Kosovo as the main term to refer to this contender. In fact, the public broadcaster, RTV, is the media using the term Kosovo the most, 27 times out of 29 times. This shows that when the draft happened, the, let's say, Spanish establishment, to refer to it in one way, was not even expecting this to happen. So it was not even planified. It was not, it came out of the blue, and they didn't have any reaction or any alternative to counterbalance all this. It is quite interesting to share with you how, for instance, in the news talk, the news show, the news program, when all this had to be informed, the journalist, the only sort of mention that he did was that, okay, we play against Kosovo, by the way, a country that Spain does not recognize. But that was all. That was the only sort of mention to specify or to underline that, okay, we don't recognize Kosovo, and that's it. But we will call you Kosovo, no worries, no worries. However, the situation is completely different when the matches are around the corner. We can see how this strategy is clearly implemented or somehow implemented in the Spanish public broadcaster. So it passed from being the most employed term to be quite relegated, but still it was used 12 times. So the mandate of avoiding the term Kosovo was not effective at all, I would say. And actually, out of 5 out of those 12 times the term Kosovo was used by RTV came from the same post, and that post was at the very end of the qualifying windows when Spain secured its classification for the World Cup after a sort of nervous trajectory, I would say, when all this euphoria sort of overcame every journalist. The typewriters basically didn't really realize about this mandate, and they started to type Kosovo as if it was the only option for that article. So the mandate was clear, but the application and the effectiveness was not that. And this makes even more sense when we see how the private media reacted. You can see that Kosovo is by far the most used term, and actually they used it the same way they did with the rest of the contenders. So they call Sweden as Sweden, they call Greece as Greece, they call Georgia as Georgia, they call Kosovo as Kosovo. Again, another anecdote was that in a news talk discussion in a private media, in Cadena Ser, they were actually commenting why RTV was so focused on avoiding the term Kosovo. And one of the journalists, in a sort of arrogant way, says, okay, I don't care about that. I call them Kosovo and I will keep calling them Kosovo no matter what the state tells me. So you can see that the message was not even internalized at the population level. And this becomes even more clear if we focus on the strategy on Twitter by the Federation. On Twitter, the day of the draft, you can see that the policy with Kosovo was the same as with the rest of the contenders. So on the left side, you can see that obviously Spain was written in capital letters because that's the Federation, they want to highlight our team, whatever. But the rest of the countries or the national teams were written the same way. So the official flag and the name in first letter in capital letters, the rest lower cases. Kosovo was the same as Sweden, Greece, and Georgia. In the image, in the picture, you can see that, again, the policy is the same for all the other 4 contenders. When the first match that took place in Spain was around the corner, that's when the puzzle starts to happen. That's when everything starts to make no sense at all. So in the next slide, we can see that, for instance, on the left side of the screen, when Sevilla was chosen as the venue for the match, still Kosovo was named as Kosovo with its flag, the same way that Greece. Okay, so there's no problem. This took place in January, so the match was still far away. The government didn't really preoccupy that much about that. But when the match was really around the corner, so a few weeks before the match actually took place, we can see how the strategy changed drastically. So we don't play against Kosovo anymore. We play against the territory of Kosovo. And actually, this is very clear if we see the previous words of that sentence. So Spain will start its road to Qatar 2022 against Greece, Georgia, and the territory of Kosovo. So you're not Kosovo anymore, you are the territory of Kosovo. And here we are implementing the measures dictated by the state, or by the Spanish government. Obviously, this, that for us may sound somehow hilarious, becomes even more hilarious if we see the reactions that came from Kosovo. Because, okay, if we play against the territory of Kosovo, then Kosovo plays against the former territory of Al-Andalus, right? So this is not the official account of the Kosovan Federation. It's not. It's just a Twitter account that has a wide following of Kosovo. But okay, you play with the territory of Kosovo. All right, we make a meme somehow, and we play against the former territory of Al-Andalus. You play with our name, we play with yours. By the way, if some of you are not familiarized with Spanish history, Al-Andalus was the name given by the Moors to the Iberian Peninsula. Long time ago in history. But you can see how, like, okay, this is a come and go game. So you play with us, we play with you. We're not gonna just remain silent and see how you deal with all that. When Kosovo raised its voice and say, hey, UEFA, listen to us, you know, Spain is not respecting me. If Spain doesn't respect me, we will try to boycott this. We don't want to play like this. Okay, we're going to report all this. If Spain doesn't treat us the way we deserve, okay, we are going to ask for them to be kicked out. So UEFA knocked on Spain's door and say, okay, Spain, listen to me. You have to respect Kosovo, otherwise you get out of the World Cup. And you can imagine what the reaction of the Spanish population would be if you go and say, okay, Spain will not play the World Cup because it didn't recognize Kosovo's name. I mean, it would be like the worst joke ever. So obviously Spain had to step back and say, okay, we will call you Kosovo. But you see this image, and it seemed to be that Spain and Kosovo are written the same way. But it's not. Size matters. No matter what people tell you, size matters, or at least in this case, size matters. So you can see how the strategy of Spain, the Spanish Federation, was to decrease the font size of Kosovo. So Greece and Spain are written with the same font size. Spain and Kosovo are not. They decreased a little bit the font size of Kosovo in order to make it inferior, in order to show you are not at my same level. And this happened with both games, home and away games. Here is the case. I mean, the previous slide was the away game in Kosovo. This is the home game against Kosovo in Sevilla. You see that the strategy is the same. So from far away, blind people like me may think that, okay, it's the same size, but it's not. As soon as I put my glasses on, I can see that the size is really different. Size matters, and that was the alternative that Spain used in order to perform or show this non-recognition. But even more, we want to propose you a very, very, very quick game. I guess that you remember or you're familiar with this find the differences, right? Two similar images, you need to find the 7 differences. So this is the same. Here we ask you to find the differences between how beIN Sports broadcasted the game and how the Spanish broadcaster RTV broadcasted the game in Sevilla, Spain versus Kosovo. Apparently is the same, but it's not. If you check the scoreboard, beIN Sports didn't really care too much and says, okay, Spain, Kosovo, initials or the acronym for Spain, the acronym for Kosovo, both in capital letters. That's it. Let's play the game, let's watch the game and see what happens. For the Spanish broadcaster, this changed. So Spain was written in capital letters, Kosovo was written in lower cases. They didn't even decrease the font size. No, they directly used lower cases. That's why I really want to thank Nahuel for his patience, because when he was preparing the flyer, he innocently wrote Spain and Kosovo the same way, and Carlos and me were like immediately telling him like, no, Spain has to be in capital letters and Kosovo in lower cases. And I guess that Nahuel thought, okay, who are these 2 creepy guys, these stupid guys just caring about this? So it was not just that we are weird, we are, but not in this case. It was just because all this makes sense right now when you see all this strategy. So with all this in mind, we can conclude that first, although Spain respected to some extent at a formal level Kosovo's symbology or Kosovo's status by showing and displaying eventually the symbology, there was a deliberate attempt not to use the term Kosovo and Republic of Kosovo, resulting in the use of lower cases or a smaller font size when no other alternative was possible. This leads us to also conclude that politics really limits sports, right? So naming and symbology matters when it comes to political conflicts. They are used as political constructs, as political weapons. However, this also shows that power relations at sporting governing bodies have a say. They have a say. These sporting governing bodies set up minimum requirements to be met. And depending on the power relations of the different federations within those governing bodies, the result may go one way or the other. Therefore, although politics, as we say, limits sport, the maneuverability of the state gets reduced. It doesn't depend only on your intentions, but on your capacity to move forward those intentions. That's why in the case of Spain, we can call this strategy, or we can conclude that the strategy of Spain was a failure because first, there was no planification at all. So the state intentions were weakened because there was no supplementary alternatives. As we can see, the day of the draft came and they didn't even expect Kosovo to be part of the same qualifying group. In fact, Kosovo ends up in the same group of Spain because initially it had gone to Serbia's group. However, Serbia and Kosovo cannot play together because there are this sort of rule within UEFA whereby countries in conflict may not or cannot play together in order to avoid potential setbacks. So Kosovo went to Group A, where Serbia was, and they said, okay, you cannot play against Serbia, so that you have to go to the next group, which is Group B. Spain was in Group B, but Spain didn't activate this policy. Spain didn't go to UEFA and say, okay, we rather don't play against Kosovo because we have a conflict with them. So that's why you can see that there was no planification at all. And actually the way media covered all this was like, okay, well, yeah, we play against Kosovo and let's say that we don't recognize them and that's all. There was no planification at all. And on top of this, there was no internalization of the message. So the discourse that the state ended up giving to all the social actors was not really internalized by these actors. And this was clearly seen in the different directions that the private and the public media followed. It is true that the measures from the state were only given to the public media. Of course, they cannot give it to the private ones. However, if this discourse was internalized by everyone, if this was a core issue for everyone in Spain, probably the private media would follow suit. However, we can see that they didn't. They kept calling them Kosovo, and even journalists said, I will call them Kosovo and I will keep calling them Kosovo, and you all want to tell me how to call them, blah, blah, blah. So all in all, the final conclusion, the conclusion you are all waiting for is that Spain's support in diplomacy gets reduced to the font size. We can say that font size matters. That's the conclusion for this very long research and very long presentation. And having said this, once again, we thank you for your attendance. Thank you for the invitation. Here are our email addresses. As Carlos said before, if you want to, you can reach us and we can send you the article if you want, the paper if you want. And now we are more than pleased to answer to your questions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos and Fernando. It has been a fantastic presentation. And the final slide for a Catalan, Fernando, is it's not a joke. It's like an essence of what we think of half of the population in Catalonia. So apart from that, we have some questions from our audience. A first question is from Jordi. Jordi is congratulating you for your work, Carlos and Fernando. This is a fantastic work, and he's wondering what are the main factors that influence the success and failure of naming strategies as a political tool in supporting diplomatic conflicts.
Very interesting question. Well, I think that as Fernando mentioned at the end, the first factor will be like have internalized the message by all the key elements in a country. I mean, private media didn't care about the name of Kosovo. There was a debate in the Spanish Congress about why this happened, why Spain needs to receive Kosovo and didn't apply for exclude Kosovo from participating in. And we need also to think that in this case, naming is the last resource of Spain, because since 2019 there was this threat that if Spain does not recognize the at symbolic level, at official level in the stadium with the anthem, with the flag, they could be excluded from the World Cup. And this was something that, of course, Spain didn't want to do it. So I think that also it depends also on the competition, because we have seen how well, I mentioned that 2 weeks ago, at the end of March, we have this karate senior competition, and Spain in this case, I'm going with all because it's a low-level competition, so we don't care about the consequences of being removed from the hosting rights. But in this case, it's being part of the World Cup. So one of the main issues is what are the risks. So in this case, Spain didn't have. I mean, Spain cannot compete with UEFA's decision or FIFA's decision, and it's something that Kosovo played very well, because there was this debate in the Spanish Congress. So the Kosovo Football Federation applied to UEFA and FIFA in advance, saying that, okay, if I'm not going to receive the full protocol level as a full member state, I will protest against Spain. So I want in advance a guarantee that Spain will recognize my full members status in FIFA and UEFA. So in the end, there are so many elements. One is the power relations, what is the but before the tournament and during the tournament, and in this case Spain was weak. And another thing that I will mention is the internal strategy, in order to all of them going at once, like it happened with Kosovo, because Kosovo press demanded I think after the matches press the declarations of Luis Enrique, why you are not calling us Kosovo? So this is an example of how all the Kosovo, the private media, the government, the national federations goes all to one in terms of defending the rights of Kosovo to being called Kosovo, Republic of Kosovo, and nothing without any other example. And in the case of Spain, it's the contrary. You have this idea that the message wasn't internalized. So it was like, okay, public broadcaster does it, but private media no. And we don't have a continuous strategy about the issue with Kosovo.
Yeah, in fact, I would like to add that if you ask the average Spaniard about Kosovo, they wouldn't even know how to put it on the map. So it was not an issue that the Spaniards as a population are concerned with. It's more about the way that the central government has to try to contain internal affairs, rather than an issue that, I don't know, like I cannot imagine people going for this middle morning coffee and say, hey, did you see that Kosovo was trying to play as Kosovo? Like, not really.
Okay, Professor Jim O'Brien, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, many thanks to Carlos and Fernando. That was a really detailed and excellent presentation, and lots of good issues there. And it's a good second spring webinar to follow the suitably named the battle for the petrodollars, I suppose. Yeah, it's a different kind of battle. Two questions really. You said a lot, and it's open to both of you to take on. First one is you said a lot about the Spanish policy-making process and a lot about how statehood, nationhood might be conferred. What did we learn about the Kosovan policy-making process? That's the other side of it a little bit, yeah? A little bit more on that. And secondly, the much vaunted role of the media to confer or deny statehood seems to give it enormous power and influence in the process in terms of legitimizing Kosovan identity. So would you like to say a bit in response to those two areas of inquiry? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Jim. I think I'm going to answer about the first one. sports was one of the key elements of Kosovar diplomacy to gaining international recognition and support. I will say, I will even compare it to the dissolution of the Soviet Union or Yugoslavia or the other ex-Yugoslavian countries like Croatia or Slovenia, or well, as it happened, for example, with Lithuania in the Barcelona Olympics in '92, that its basketball team was a way to show that, okay, we're not this Russian concept anymore, we are Lithuanian. And in this case, I think that Kosovo followed that same path in terms of, okay, through sports, we can be introduced in the international agenda as at the same level of other countries. And in fact, it was very successful, because even when in Spain, we don't know, as Fernando mentioned, most of the people cannot place Kosovo on the map. It's like, thanks to these situations, at least people know that Kosovo exists, and there is this debate of if they are an independent state or not. But it's publicity, and Kosovo moved very good in terms of assuring the recognition of its statehood from the sports side, at least. And this was the perfect example. So Spain tried to symbolically, and in terms of naming, not trying to refer as Republic of Kosovo or just Kosovo, and Kosovo prepared in advance, moving to asking UEFA and FIFA to assure that Spain is going to recognize its official symbols. So we have like two opposite sides. The Kosovar side are very conscious that the sport is a key element of its policy to guarantee and maintaining the idea that they are an independent state. So they are active in terms of what's going on with all of these issues, specifically if it happens in countries like Spain, Serbia, of course, or Greece of Slovakia, and they can harm the participation of the Kosovar delegations. But in the case of Spain, we have a reactive policy. It's not like, as Fernando mentioned, in Spain, not the Spanish Federation nor the Spanish government prepared to this situation that, okay, we don't want to play with Kosovo during the qualifiers. So only after that situation happened, it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do right now? Or if we apply this boycott in terms of denying the visas, or we cannot change the official flag because maybe UEFA expelled us from the qualifying process for the Qatar 2022 World Cup. So that's why the naming was the last resource available for Spain in this case of football.
Yeah, exactly. And continuing with that, I think that in this particular case, Spain did the hard work for Kosovo. I mean, like if I was a member of the Kosovan Federation, I would be very thankful to the decision taken by Spain, because by cornering yourself so much with this sort of boycott in different shapes and ways, Kosovo just had to follow suit. It's like, okay, you don't want to display my symbols? Okay, no, I have the endorsement of the IOC, of FIFA, of UEFA. I just need to raise my voice and that's it. And Kosovo conquered all that. You know, Kosovo was able to get its flag displayed in the stadium. Its name eventually was displayed. So Kosovo didn't really care that it was in a lower cases or in a different font size. They wanted to be called Kosovo, and they got it. So I think that if Spain acted in a more humble way, the benefits could be higher for them. However, when you have such a strong reactive reaction, it was more counterproductive, because if you didn't stop what you wanted, and eventually you had to make it twice. So for Kosovo, I mean, again, if I was a member of the Kosovan Federation, I would be thankful and waiting for the next match against Spain, because the reaction will be on my favor. And as for the second question, which is a very interesting question, because it takes us to the discussion on the struggle for the significance, right? So discussion for or the struggle to set up a particular significance, a particular point of view in a debate. And in the case of Spain, initially it could see that that could happen, that the public or the message from the state could really take ground, but eventually it proved all the contrary, and you can see that the message, the discourse, or the significance that was implemented was actually the reality of Spain. Like, we don't care about the status of Kosovo, in the sense that it's not something that worries us right now. Some other issues or some consequences of this, especially, I don't know, in Catalonia or in the Basque Country, and how having Kosovo play in this way may affect the intentions of the Catalan Federation and the Basque Federation, might affect, I guess that would be a core issue for the Spanish society. But the case of Kosovo is just like, we didn't care, and the private media basically just reflected that.
Thank you very much. Noel?
Yes, first of all, thanks to Fernando and Carlos for sharing their insights in such interesting topic. I completely understood why to not write Kosovo in capital letters. So thank you very much for the clarification again. When you were talking about this, I wrote two questions for you. The first one is, if does refusing to use an opponent's name in a sporting event help achieve political goals, or does it ultimately fail as a strategy? And the other one, it's about how can your study help to frame and understand other diplomatic conflicts at a symbolic level in sporting competitions? And thanks for all.
Thanks for your question. The first one, I would say that in the end, it's connected with Jim's question that I forgot to tell. Outside Spain, I think nobody realized about that this happened. So it was an internal debate in Spain. So in fact, the reaction was more probably after social media, after people were sharing the images of the scoreboard with costs in lower cases. So it's not, for example, like it happens with People's Republic of China and Taiwan, that it's a very long fight about recognition of the statehood, in terms of China's demanding that, okay, Taiwan is our field, so we are setting the name and the flag, and in the Olympics and in other competitions. So, and that's the main issue, I would say, that you need to if you want to achieve success, you need to have a strategy and analyze it, and need to realize what is successful and what no. Because this policy in terms of sport to Spain, it's more problematic than gaining, than giving some beneficials. For example, during the debate in the Spanish Congress, the nationalist parties or independentist parties from Basque Country and Catalonia put pressure on the government in terms of, okay, we're receiving Kosovo, why this leftist government cannot promote or help to national the national federation, the Basque national teams and Catalonian national teams playing, as in the case of Kosovo or Scotland, to their few examples. So we have, this is a good example. I'm trying to connect it with the second question, that it is a good example of how you need to prepare in advance about having a successful strategy and think a lot in order to be successful.
Yeah, I really want to focus on the second question, because I think from an anthropological point of view, it's pretty much connected with what we are currently seeing in society. So again, what I said to Jim in terms of these struggles for the significance and how to get a message or a discourse imposed and become with a hegemonic discourse or counter-hegemonic discourse. So we can see that how now in this postmodern world, absolutely everything is being measured, absolutely everything is being scrutinized. So in this aspect, Spain or whatever country going into such a fierce tug of war for just a name reflects all this. Like, I don't want you to call me like that, I want you to call me this or whatever. So it's just all this constant way for stressing an aspect of identity. But also we can see that aspects that seem to finish at the end of the Cold War are coming back again, and we can see how there are so many new boycotts in sports in order to perform political aspects. So now we saw it recently, a couple of weeks ago, with Indonesia, and how it was I mean, it was supposed to host the U20 World Cup, and because Israel is participating, they decided not to welcome them, let's say, and FIFA just removed the rights. We can see how many, in many sports, I would say all of them actually, many Arab countries are refusing to play against Israeli participants. Obviously, the most clear case now is Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. So we can see how this boycotting, counter-diplomacy, renegotiation processes through sport, and especially through the symbolism of sport, is becoming more and more relevant and more current. So I guess that this is a line to see or to foresee in order to research or to study potential new conflict that may arise for sure.
Yeah, in connection with what Fernando said, is until the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the main reaction in terms of, okay, trying to keep athletes' participation, but at the same time banning the state, we have this participating as neutrals. For example, in the 2016 Olympics, Russia participated as the Russian Olympic Committee, not under Russia with its flag and its anthem. And we need to ask why this time, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russia was directly excluded, or the athletes were, it's like, did the athletes began declaring the war? So that's also important to say, okay, are the athletes separated from the state, are part of the state? Do they need to pay for the consequences of their government's actions? And if they are separated from the state, why cannot keeping the neutral the neutral participation without flags, without anthems, etc.? But in this case, we come again to the power relations, because the IOC hoped and other federations hoped that, okay, just with that, it will be enough to contain the Western attempts to block Russia and Belarus, but in the end, it wasn't enough. So when all these countries like France, United Kingdom, Poland, Czech Republic threat with, okay, if Russia is going to continue participating, we move, it's like, okay, I don't have another option. So I'm going to, it's better to lose Russia and Belarus than losing the rest of the most powerful sporting countries of Europe. And that's a failure, of course, of the separation between the sport and politics through naming and through symbolism.
The main question is if we can separate sport and politics. This is something that in Spain, a lot of governments said that we have to separate sport and politics, at least not in order to not to continue the political conflict in the sporting arena. But when we analyze this type of conflicts, we can see that it's impossible to divide, it's impossible to separate what is happening in the political sphere and what is happening in the sports sphere. I think that your analysis reflects very well a non-solved conflict in Spain, which is the territorial conflict. And when sport can show these territorial differences and can arouse the main differences between, for example, Catalonia, the Basque Country, and the Spanish state, the Spanish government, then all the Spanish government starts creating a new discourse in order to wrap and in order to separate the main conflict that it has from a possible scenario, which is a football match. We don't have more time. Thank you very much, Carlos and Fernando. It has been a pleasure to have you here in this seminar and this webinar hosted by the Faculty of Business and Communication at the UVic and Spring Network. For Spring, it's very interesting to have you here and to organize this type of seminars, because this is one of the main ideas of a network, to create a space for researchers to meet and to share comments and ideas. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the assistants that have joined the webinar, and we hope to have you here in a new webinar in the following weeks. Thank you very much.
Definitely. Thanks to